Today's class is going to be on the subject of anger, one of my favorites, since it seems to be one of people's favorite behaviors. First principle that I'd like to get to is that anger is never caused by other people or events in the present. That's a huge statement. If we understood just that, it would change all of our relationships. No kidding. For one thing, it's not caused by other people or events. We can't blame our anger on other people. But why do I say in the present? Because anger is caused by people and events from the past. In past lessons, we talked about PTSD, post-childhood stress disorder. So our anger is caused by an accumulation of pain caused by events that occurred in the past that have piled up and made us emotionally hypersensitized, much like people are in battle in PTSD. When you get mad at the driver in front of you, for example, or get angry at your spouse or child, it's not the single event in front of you. The driver in front of you delays you from getting to where you're going by what? 0.2 of a second. No, we blow up because we're reacting to the pain inflicted upon us from the time we were little children. The driver in front of us is yet another example piled on thousands of others that we are not worthwhile, that we're not cared for by the people around us, and it becomes more than we can take and we explode. So it is caused by events and people from the past. So already we have an exception to this principle. Anger is never caused by people or events in the present if you are an adult. But children can blame their pain and anger on present events and present people. Our influence on them can be nearly total, especially the younger they are. So another way to see this is, as a child, you were a victim. Children are the true innocent victims on earth. As an adult, you simply act like a victim. How do we know that anger is not caused by others? Now, in the books, there are quite a number of metaphors, and I'm going to go through just briefly 2 of them, just I guess for a sense of completeness, because it's pretty difficult to talk about anger without talking about them. The first is the story of the $2 versus the 20 million. If I steal $2 from you and it's your last $2, then your reaction is going to be extreme. If I take $2 from you and you have $20 million, then your reaction is going to be considerably less, which proves that taking $2 doesn't make us angry. It's whether or not we have $20 million. Emotionally speaking, if we were full, if we felt unconditionally loved completely, we would not get angry. I've proven that now thousands of times in my own life and in the lives of other people. So, for example, on many occasions, while I was in England, for example, there was somebody who came up on the stage at a break, somebody who's just angry at the world. I mean, just you could crack walnuts with those lips, just pursed tight and tense and angry. And I just held her and rocked her like a baby, like she was 2 years old. And eventually it was pretty obvious that she was feeling peaceful. So I asked her how she was feeling. She said, I feel peaceful. I said, keep going. She said, I feel full. I feel calm. I said, are you angry at anyone? She said, well, no, I'm not. I said, but the people in your world, your husband, your children, your boss, all those people who moments ago you were furious at have not changed one bit, which proves that the anger could not have been caused by those people because those people hadn't changed any, and simply in the process of my loving her or giving her $20 million, the pain went away. Another metaphor that we've used on many occasions, which is very useful to some people, is the metaphor of the sunburn. If I touch you on the shoulder as a gesture of affection. You would enjoy it. If you were sunburned from head to toe and I touched you on the shoulder as a gesture of affection, again, you would very likely hit the ceiling and very likely blame me for your pain, although that's not true. My only crime, if you like, is touching you on the shoulder. In fact, in this particular case, I specified that I'm touching you on the shoulder with affection. And yet you reacted with pain because you're the one who laid out in the sun for too long. Or perhaps there could be some freakish instance where somebody laid you out in the sun, I suppose, and staked you there and you got burned from head to toe. But the point is that my touching on the shoulder doesn't cause your pain. Emotionally speaking, it's the same. If we're already in pain, if we're already suffering from post-childhood stress disorder, if we're carrying around with us a mountain of pain and fear from not being cared about, then it takes nothing to set us off. A touch on the shoulder, emotionally speaking, a driver cutting in front of us, somebody making perhaps even an innocent comment. It doesn't even have to be a minimally critical one. And we can explode. Not because of what somebody else did, but because of our sunburn. Another proof that anger is not caused by others is that different people have different reactions to the same event. So the same thing happens to two people, exactly the same thing. And we've all seen this many times. One person gets angry, the other person doesn't. So the event could not have caused the anger. If events caused anger, every person would respond to a given event in the same way. In this particular case, if one person responds with anger and the event causes anger, then all people would respond with anger. But there pretty much isn't an event where all people would respond with anger. I can't think of one. You can think of some really extreme examples. For example, but what if your family was murdered? Well, we have quite a few examples of that actually throughout history. Just recently in the last century, in the concentration camps in Poland and Germany and Austria and other places, we have examples of people, one of whom wrote a book, Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, where he talked about the fact that his family was all killed. And he actually acquired a sense of meaning from that. He described others who actually learned to be more loving as a result of the difficult experiences that they encountered, whereas other people became embittered, resentful, angry, and so on. I know a man personally whose family, whose wife, children, parents, brothers, sisters were all killed in a concentration camp. And when I talked to him, he lived in France. And he said that despite all those things that had happened, he was actually grateful for the experiences that they had suffered and for the experiences that he had had, because as a result of them, he chose to learn to be more loving, whereas many people became angry. So it proves that the event doesn't cause the feeling. Bad drivers. I used to become furious at bad drivers, and somebody passed me, well, then I couldn't live until I passed them in return. Now I just don't care. With anger, there's always something else going on that we're missing. Like when somebody says that they were late because of the traffic. Sure, traffic was involved, but it was not the cause. The real cause was our lack of preparedness, our lack of thinking ahead, our lack of allowing a sufficient buffering time that no matter what happened, we'd still be on time. And the same is true with anger. Other people are involved in our becoming angry. They might have been involved in the event that seems to have precipitated it. They might be around, but they're not the cause. So, what is the real cause of anger? The real cause is simple. It's pain. So, why do we get angry? Another way of saying it, because anger gives us relief from our pain. So if pain is the cause of anger and we use anger only for relief of it, isn't the next question glaringly obvious? What is the source of our pain. Until we know that, how can we address it? Until we know the source of our pain, we can't eliminate it, and the pain persists, followed by the associated anger. So, what is the source of our pain? Let's go through a few. Emptiness, not feeling loved. Love is air. Without it, we choke to death. It hurts to choke. We drown, we starve to death, we die of thirst. All painful conditions. We must have love. In fact, emptiness really isn't nearly strong enough a word to describe the feeling of not being loved. Perhaps the words gutted, living in a vacuum, eviscerated, destitute. The pain of not having enough love is just indescribable. And as if emptiness were not enough, there is more. There are more causes of pain. Fear. Fear is pain augmented by fear of more pain. And the pain, the original pain, is again caused by the lack of love. So we're sunburned, and if you're sunburned from head to toe, you walk around in mortal terror that somebody's going to touch you because you're already in pain, and people who are in pain are terrified of more. I did a seminar in Dallas and in England where I took a long needle, and I think I may have described this before, and stabbed myself in the forearm with it and let it dangle there with a syringe attached to it. It's a dramatic demonstration of the fact that we all carry around needles that have been poked in us from the time we were literally born, or if embryology is to be believed, when we were fetuses before we were born. So we've grown up in an atmosphere of pain where needles are poked in us over and over and over again as I don't love you is communicated to us. So we walk around with needles poking out from every square millimeter of our skin. So we live in terror of more needles being inserted, because the more needles we have, we don't become accustomed to it. In fact, we become more sensitized to it. We're afraid not only of more needles being inserted, but of even being touched, much like the sunburn. If somebody were to make motions that would indicate that they were about to embrace us with affection, well, if you have needles sticking out from everywhere in your body, you wouldn't welcome that demonstration of affection because it would make the pain worse. Another source of pain, unhappiness, which is really a combination of emptiness and fear. And it might be said that unhappiness and pain could very well be just synonyms. Another cause, confusion. Pain is bad enough. Confusion about the cause of our pain or the solution, which is unavoidable if we don't know the cause, is crazy making. If we know exactly why something's hurting and that we know that there's a potential solution, do you know that actually it's been studied that our pain is less? Whereas if we have a pain of unknown cause, and pretty much everybody listening's had that, suddenly you have a pain in your knee, suddenly you have an unusual headache. Is that a brain tumor? We hate going into the doctor with a pain and the doctor says, well, I can't really find the cause. We'd almost rather be told something terrible. If we're confused, what is our next step? Well, we can't know because we don't know the cause, which leads us to the next cause of pain, which is helplessness. With all the above, with our emptiness and our fear and our being unhappy and our confusion and not knowing what to do, what's left? Helplessness. We have no hope of being able to do anything about our pain. And that's intolerable. Nobody can live with that. The death of hope just might be the worst facet of pain. As I see people go through divorce, death of loved ones, depression, so on. If there's some element of hope, they can survive. But when hope dies, it's a terrible feeling. That's why often, even when people experience the death of a parent who was never loving toward them, they experience anguish, because now not even the hope of that parent ever loving them exists. Whereas before, they nourished this seed, really kind of a ridiculous seed, that their parent at age 90 would somehow learn to love them, or that they would figure out what it would take so that the parent would love them. But once the parent's gone, that hope's gone with them. With a divorce, all the hopes and dreams that we experience when we get married, poof, they're gone. And it turns out that anger helps with all these sources of pain. When we feel angry, we're filled with a sense of power that fills our emptiness. We feel less helpless when we have that sense of power, so we feel less afraid. Because we feel less empty and less afraid, we have the brief, at least, illusion that we're not unhappy. Anger is so absolutely emotionally and mentally occupying, it just consumes us that we're not even aware anymore that we're not happy. We're too busy being angry. We're not confused anymore, because when we're angry, we're blaming somebody else, and we don't feel as helpless, because anger at least has the appearance of our doing something. Turns out it's really foolish and it's really just an illusion, but anger temporarily addresses all the causes of our pain. But it's temporary, it doesn't last, never works. So why don't we just simply eliminate the pain, like for real, at the source? First reason is we don't recognize it. We don't even recognize that we're in pain. I talk every single day to people who tell me, when I ask, so tell me about your life, people I've never met before. They say, well, it's okay. When people say, when you ask them how they're doing, okay or fine, which are neck and neck for the two most popular answers, what they mean is, no tornado has swept through my neighborhood and killed everybody I know. I wasn't given the diagnosis of cancer, terminal cancer, by my doctor this week. Haven't had a car wreck in the last couple of days. Wasn't fired. One of my children didn't become pregnant or get put into a drug rehab center. We're talking about the circumstances of our life. We've been in pain for so long, we don't even recognize it. I've had people tell me that their lives are okay who've endured abuse that is almost beyond description. We just get familiar with it. We don't really ever get accustomed to it, because as the pain builds, eventually it will come out. As anger, as some of the other getting and protecting behaviors, as physical illness. But for the longest time, we may not recognize we're in pain at all. Another reason that we don't simply eliminate the pain is that anger is available to us. It's faster and easier in the short term to get angry. Drug addicts don't even deal with their pain. I know, because I was a drug addict for years. They just eliminate it with drugs. So as long as they have enough drugs and you ask them how they're doing, they say, okay. So if you ask a drug addict, are you in pain? The answer, no. What about emotional pain? Nope. Because either they just got enough medication so that they're mellow, so their pain is treated, or if their pain is mild, in the back of their head, or maybe in the front of their head, they know they have a solution at hand. So they're not really worried about their pain. They can treat it at any time they want. And anger does the same thing. It gives us such a jolt of adrenaline and power that the pain is instantly gone. When the pain comes up, we react automatically and so immediately with anger that in our minds, get this, the pain never happened. We just skip the pain. Somebody does something you don't like, and immediately you become angry. In fact, we say this is accepted as an axiom, as a truth. She made me angry. He made me angry. They made me angry. We're not even aware that we went through a process that ended up in anger. What's the process? Gosh, we've talked about this many times. An event occurred, and we think we go straight to anger. we skip in our minds the fact that we first made a judgment about whether or not that thing would hurt us. Then we experienced a feeling, usually, well, almost always, fear. And then, poof, then we react with anger. But we go from event to anger so fast that we don't identify the fact that we went through judgment and feeling. So that distracts us from the pain and actually numbs the pain. So why don't we simply eliminate the pain? Another reason. Because anger is so seductive and justifiable. She made me angry. If you said that to a room of 100 people and she had just slapped you in the face, somebody came in and slapped you in the face and you turned to the audience and said, that just makes me so angry. The entire audience would agree with you. Nobody would raise their hand out of 100 average people and go, no, that's not really true. In fact, it's kind of like, duh, obvious, because I was doing fine. She came in, slapped my face. Now I'm angry. Immediately, in fact, I'm angry, or at least so I believe, because remember, I skipped the judgment and the feeling. So it's so obvious. It seduces or tricks, in this particular case, that's what I mean by seduce, tricks everybody, including me. Another reason, we don't simply eliminate the pain. We don't know a way to eliminate the pain. We use the tools we have. Nobody ever taught us how to deal genuinely with the pain. Remember, we don't know we're in it in the first place, so why would anybody ever bother to teach us? Read Real Love and Parenting. One of the most important things that happens in Real Love and Parenting is that, in that particular book, is that parents are taught how to teach their children when they're in pain, and that they're reacting to pain instead of reacting to what the other person did. We didn't get taught that. We didn't get taught how to respond to pain without using anger, which is what we can teach our children at a very young age. And they're brilliant. They understand the reasoning. They absorb the lesson with ease. My 3-year-old granddaughter understands beautifully that other people don't make her angry and has learned other ways to deal with inconvenience, injustice, discomfort caused by other people other than angry. I mean, she's learned this at 3. Imagine if you learned that at 3, how different your life would be. James Baldwin said, I imagine one of the reasons people cling to their hates so stubbornly is because they sense once hate is gone, they will be forced to deal with the pain. And we don't know how to deal with the pain, which is why we use anger. It's why anger is so seductive and justifiable. And so we are screwed. So we use anger. Anger seems so unavoidable, and it seems so logical to blame it on other people. I was not angry, you did something, it must be you. Immediately I'm angry, so it's obvious you must be the cause. And it's called proximity. Proximal is both a geometric and a medical term, well, and it's a term used in other ways, which means close. Proximal versus distal. Whatever event is closest in time and space to our anger must be the cause. Remember, the lady comes in, she slaps you in the face, immediately you're angry, she's standing right there. It just happened 0.1 seconds ago. Poof, you were angry, she must be the cause. Wrong. Just because something is close doesn't mean it's the cause. That would be like there's a weather forecast that says a hurricane's coming. And immediately after the forecast, the hurricane comes. So, following the reasoning that whatever's close is the cause, then the forecast caused the hurricane. Ridiculous. Or doing a study that 70% of people who got a diagnosis of cancer this year drank orange juice within 2 weeks of the diagnosis. So, ergo, orange juice causes cancer. No, just because 2 events are linked or close to each other does not mean that one causes the other. But there are some people who actually notice, without real love training, that it's not the proximal event. It's not the thing close in time or space that causes anger. I don't know how many of you are familiar with heavyweight boxing, I followed it for years and years. I don't anymore. But there was a fighter named Mike Tyson. In my opinion, he was the best boxer who has ever lived in the heavyweight division. At his peak, when he was a young man, his bouts lasted an average of less than a minute, way less than a round. Experienced, great, big, 250 strong professional boxers would step in the ring with him. He would come forward, he would smash his way through their defenses, and they'd be lying unconscious on the canvas in less than a minute. He was amazing, became the champion of the world. But then, through womanizing, a ill-fated marriage, a hectic lifestyle, economic and emotional leeches who gathered around him, money grabbers, depression, attempted suicide, a conviction for rape, and a prison stay. It had quite a toll on him. I mean, to the point where he finally, when he came back to boxing, in a fit of just absolute rage, he actually, on national television, bit off part of the ear of his opponent. All of you who watched that match will never forget that. We couldn't believe we were seeing it. He was so angry. And I watched an interview with him, and I took notes as I watched. He said, my mother was promiscuous. My father, he said, I think it was my father, got into conflicts and left at an early age. I was in a horrific neighborhood. It was kill or be killed. I was robbed as a grade school kid regularly. I was bullied. I couldn't do anything but run. I was afraid all the time, and I couldn't understand why somebody would treat me so badly. I am the way I am. This is the most ferocious fighter I have ever seen. I am the way I am because I'm afraid, he said. I'm afraid of being hurt as I was when I was a child, when all I could do was run. I did not want to be humiliated again. I was afraid to fight at first, but when I learned to fight, I was happy that nobody would ever humiliate me again. So now I'm more assertive, that'd be one word for it, to protect myself from that. I bought some pigeons to be with stolen money when I was a kid. Some guys came to steal one of my pigeons. I objected. He said, you want this pigeon back? He grabbed the pigeon by the neck and broke the neck of my pigeon. I hit that guy and I beat him even though he was younger. And after that, people didn't bother me as much. Then I began stealing and robbing people at about age 12. It was exciting. It was thrilling. I went to prison at age 12. When he was in prison, a guy taught him to box. He became intrigued. He became a gentleman. Then he was turned over to a really famous trainer, a guy named Cus D'Amato, who boxing aficionados would recognize, who told Mike Tyson that he could do anything. He could be a champion. Mike says he gave me confidence. I was grateful that nobody would ever bully me again. With women, it was exciting. I wanted to dominate them and ravish them. This man's been called a monster, a crazy man, a lunatic, and yet he identified later in his life that it was all a reaction to fear. Amazing that he would recognize that. So why anger? Why do we choose that particular behavior? Because, well, it's really rewarding. We get a lot from anger. When parents call me and they say, I have this child who gets angry all the time. Why is that? I say, because your child gets what he wants by being angry. No child repeats a behavior that isn't rewarding in some way. So children are a primitive and really simple example of why we do a thing, because it works. So what do we get from anger? We get a lot of power. Mike Tyson, he was frightened, so he learned to box. He learned to beat people up. He felt powerful. He felt strong. And another thing that we get is a physical rush of adrenaline. Anybody who's been angry knows that feeling. Your heart pounds. You get a flushed feeling to your skin. You get a feeling, even your thoughts run faster, and it seems that you can concentrate more. It is a real physical rush to get angry. What else do we get from anger? We get a sense of control. Dr. Giuseppe Di Giuseppe, who is a co-author of a book in 2006 called Understanding Anger Disorder, says that they did a study of 1,000 young kids in grades 4 through 12 who overwhelmingly rated their anger as good if it accomplished their motives, even if their motives were destructive. As one young kid said, "My anger is good because I wanted to make my little brother pick up my toys, and I got him to do it." When we get angry, we get people to move. And we all saw this from the time that we were little children. Our parents would come in the room and say, "Didn't I tell you to pick up these toys?" And we moved faster. Well, we watched our parents get us to move faster and control us with anger all of our lives. And so when we got older, we learned very quickly to get angry ourselves and control the people around us. Perhaps our brothers and sisters, perhaps people at school. Where do you think bullies come from? Bullies come from the fact that they feel helpless. They feel there's no such thing as a bully who has a great sense of self-esteem. They feel helpless, they feel worthless, but when they get angry, when they hurt people, they can control them, which makes them temporarily feel better. What does anger mean? What are the meanings of it? Well, one meaning of anger is victimhood. We are demonstrating that we feel that we have been victimized. Another meaning to anger is that we have a lack of responsibility. When we get angry at somebody else, instead of taking responsibility for our own behavior, we're blaming everybody else. Another meaning of anger is that it violates the law of choice. When I get angry, what I'm saying is that the law of choice applies to everybody. Everybody has the right, according to the law of choice, to think, speak, and do according to their own will until they do something that I don't agree with. Anger is also selfish. When I'm angry, I'm thinking of who? Me. Look what you've done to me. Look what you should have done for me. I am the center of the universe. Me, me, me. So look at all these characteristics of anger. Victimhood, complete lack of responsibility, violates the law of choice, selfishness. What does all that tell you? What would you call something that promoted victimhood, lack of responsibility, disregarding the rights of others, and complete selfishness? What word would you use? Not complicated. Anger is simply wrong. It just doesn't work. It never produces happiness. It destroys relationships. It is wrong. Now, wrong has become a very unpopular word in a world of moral relativism. We just don't talk about right and wrong. We really don't. We talk about what we can get away with. We talk about what's popular. We talk about what makes money. How many reality shows are based solely on, who's the most popular? You hardly even read, because I read newspapers and magazines at a fairly voluminous rate, and you hardly even hear people talk about right and wrong. Talk about politically correct, talk about politically advantageous. People hate it when I say that anger is wrong. They hate to be told that they're doing something wrong. Why? Because they see my statement as how they would say it. They're saying that I'm telling them not to be angry, that they shouldn't be, because that's what they would be saying if they said something was wrong. And I'm not doing that at all. I'm just describing anger, that it doesn't work. Or people who would say that anger is wrong wouldn't buy that because they say that anger couldn't be wrong because it's natural. Well, that's just not true. Snake venom is natural too, but anybody want to volunteer for a bite? Hurricanes are natural. Anybody want one? Anger is natural, but it's also uniformly destructive. So it's wrong. It doesn't work. Mostly because it detracts from our happiness. So let's define happiness. Happiness is loved, loving, and responsible. So while I'm angry, can I feel loved? Anger shuts out all other feelings. So no, I can't. While I'm angry, can I be loving? No, it's impossible. You can't be loving and angry at the same time, because when you're angry, you're thinking about yourself. And can I be responsible while I'm angry? Again, no, because when I'm angry, I'm blaming other people for how I feel and for what I do. Another definition of happiness is expectations minus reality. So, for example, I got a call from a lady in the real love community, and she said, "What do you see about me?" Because she said, "I understand that if somebody asks you, you will tell them what you see in them that they might not be seeing themselves." And I said, "Sometimes I do that. I'm not aware that I made it a practice." She said, "So what do you see about me that I'm missing?" I said, "You're afraid. Fear governs almost everything you do. Fear is written all over your face. Fear governs the way you sit there. In fact, on this particular Skype call, I can see fear in everything about you." Well, she argued with me and argued, and I kept trying to point out the fear in her as she argued, because she called and asked. And then eventually, because her arguments weren't working, then she sulked. Later, she wrote to say that she had expected that I would be soft and fuzzy with her on the call. Well, that wasn't the purpose of the call. She called saying, "I feel loved. What I want to do is to learn what it is that I'm not seeing." But that wasn't true. She lied. She really expected to be treated like a child, to be petted, to be told that she was doing everything great, and then admitted even that she wanted me to tell her that she was somehow extra special, that she was doing better than anybody else was doing, that she was learning faster. So her expectations were, actually, it should be the other way around, come to think of it. It should be reality minus expectations. Because what she got was what she asked for. What she expected was huge, and she ended up in the hole. More characteristics of anger. Anger is arrogant. When I'm angry, I'm telling you that when I make mistakes, well, I had good reasons. But when you make mistakes, mostly the ones that affect me, then we have to stop everything until you're sufficiently punished. Your crimes are always greater than mine. I deserve to be forgiven. You don't. That's what my anger says. One man said to me about someone who mistreated him, he said, "It's not fair." And I said, "You're right, it isn't fair. It's completely unfair that you are not treated as harshly as you wish this other man to be," which made him be very quiet, because we almost never would want ourselves to be treated with the strict sense of what we call justice that we want to be applied to other people. When we're angry, we don't really want justice. We just want our way. Anger is prison. I came in the room one day and two of my kids were arguing with each other. And so I just picked one and said, "What are you mad about?" And of course, you know the next word out of the child's mouth. "Well, he did whatever it is." And I said, "So he made you mad?" "Yeah." I said, "Well, then let's just go to Home Depot and we'll get a steel ring and we'll get a Black & Decker drill and drill a hole in your nasal septum and put the steel ring through your nose, attach it to a chain and hand it to your brother. Since you already claim that he makes you feel a certain way, you're already his slave, so we just as well formalize it." We're in a prison when we claim that other people caused our anger. And pretty much every time we get angry, we're blaming somebody else. Now, occasionally somebody will say, "I'm so angry at myself." Oh, that's just almost never true. We're always blaming somebody else. In fact, here's an author who says, hate traps us by binding us too tightly to our adversary. It's an author from Czechoslovakia, and I haven't the slightest idea how to say that name. That's why I said an author. Or Toni Morrison said, "When a man angers you, he conquers you." We become prisoners to the people that we claim make us angry. Another characteristic of anger is that it's a flame that ignites pretty much all conflict. Disagreements are absolutely unavoidable. Just being human beings, we're going to disagree with each other about a lot of things. I disagree with the approach that people take to lots of problems, or I disagree with their tastes, what's best, what's most desirable. But the difference between a disagreement and a conflict is anger. As long as you and I simply disagree, we can work out a solution. I don't have to watch the movie that's your favorite. I don't have to like your favorite ice cream. I don't have to wear your favorite color dress, for example. But if you insist that I like what you like, or if either of us becomes angry about what's best and most and favorite, then we have a conflict. Anger is also blinding. When we're angry, all we can see is our pain and how we want to hurt the other person. We can't see them at all. We can't really see ourselves. All we see is our fear and our emptiness, our pain and what we want. And anger is just utterly blinding. Robert Ingersoll, for example, said, anger is a wind that blows out the lamp of the mind. 3,000 years ago, they knew this. In the book of Proverbs in the Old Testament, it says, he that is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he that ruleth his spirit than he that taketh a city. It's the ultimate power to be able to choose how we feel rather than to be held captive by others because of our anger. Anger is controlling. When I get angry at you, the whole purpose is to persuade you to agree with me or to get you to do something that I want. And it's everywhere. Many people, Gordon B. Hinckley said, walk in darkness at noonday. They may not carry a white cane or have a seeing eye dog by their side, but they are still surely blind. They are blinded by anger, hate, prejudice, and more. Or Baltasar Gracian said, never do anything when you're in a temper, for you will do everything wrong. More characteristics of anger. Anger multiplies. Anger is a form of violence, sometimes physical, often emotional or spiritual. Martin Luther King said this, the ultimate weakness of violence is that it is a descending spiral, begetting the very thing it seeks to destroy. Instead of diminishing evil, it multiplies it. He continues and said, through violence you may murder the liar, but you cannot murder the lie, nor establish the truth. Through violence you may murder the hater, but you do not murder hate. In fact, violence merely increases hate, and so it goes. Returning hate for hate multiplies hate, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. There have been authors and people over the many years who have been inspired to understand what the role of love is and what the role of anger is. Anger makes happiness absolutely impossible. It destroys our happiness because happiness comes from being loved, loving, and responsible. And the instant I'm angry, I can't be any of those. And unless somebody is unusually enlightened, unless the people around us are, it tends to destroy their happiness too. Again, happiness is loved, loving, and responsible. And in the presence of anger, those conditions vanish. In fact, let's carry it a step further, and we can say that no good feeling can survive the presence of anger. It's impossible to be angry and grateful, angry and loving, angry and peaceful. All the good feelings vanish when we're angry, but again, it is so sneaky and deceptive. It's irresponsible. We mentioned this earlier. Now, I am not saying that we should not be angry. I'm not using the word should here at all. I'm just saying that it destroys all good things, all good feelings, all sense of responsibility, all happiness. So continuing to choose anger is simply, in a word, stupid. It doesn't work. 2,300 years ago, somebody wrote in the Old Testament, be not hasty in thy spirit to be angry, for anger resteth in the bosom of fools. You're an idiot if you get angry. And I've been an idiot many times. Kingman Brewster said there's no lasting hope in violence, and anger is a form of violence. only temporary relief from hopelessness. And we talked about that as one of the reasons that we use anger much earlier in this particular class. In our defense, until we see other choices, anger may be all that we have. And we'll get to how to make other choices shortly. Anger destroys us. I've watched anger eat people up just as surely as a cancer. And in fact, I've seen people, it's now been demonstrated that stress causes pretty much every physical disease there is. So it can literally cause cancer. Mark Twain said, anger is an acid that can do more harm to the vessel in which it is stored than to anything on which it is poured. Anger is like taking poison yourself and hoping the other person will die. It just doesn't work. And we alluded to this just a second ago, but this is stating it more directly. Anger is physically harmful. One large study published in a medical journal called Circulation about a dozen years ago found that among 13,000 middle-aged men and women who rated high in traits like anger but had normal blood pressure were twice as likely to have coronary artery disease. That's what gives you heart attacks. And 3 times as likely to have a heart attack compared with people with the lowest levels of anger. So they could have the same blood pressure, but if you're angry, you're 3 times as likely to have a heart attack. So does anger ever really have a place? Well, sure. I mean, it might even be a positive step for somebody, for example, who's completely emotionally dead, who's never expressed himself. And I've known people like this, who've never expressed any kind of feeling at all, and they finally express themselves, and the feeling they express is anger. Well, I suppose anger could be better than being emotionally dead, but only as an interim, only on the way to becoming loving and happy, never as an end result. So now we get to the big question. How do we eliminate anger? I mean, that's what we really want to know, since we know that it doesn't work, it's harmful, it kills us, it destroys us emotionally. How do we get rid of it? It's really pretty similar to the question, how can we eliminate pain, isn't it? Because after all, we said pain is the cause of anger. So if you can eliminate pain, you can eliminate anger. So how do we eliminate pain? Well, love, duh. Kind of obvious. So how do we find the love? Well, all the real love books are filled with these answers. You tell the truth, you find people who can love you, you participate in conference calls, you attend groups. The books all tell you how to find love, how to meet with people. You get a coach if necessary. You might do an intervention. There are lots of ways to find love. But right now our subject is more specialized. It's anger. So in addition to eliminating our pain with love, let's specifically talk about how to eliminate anger. First step, be aware of it and don't deny it. We've got to be more aware of our anger and use it as a sign that we're moving away from the path that leads to happiness and what we want. Anger is information. It's not a condemnation. I don't ever tell somebody you shouldn't be angry. I just say to them, you realize you're pretty angry. I can't tell you how many people have said to me, no, I'm not. Yeah, you are. Your veins are pulsing. You are on fire. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be angry. I'm not telling people that they're wrong. I'm telling you here that anger is wrong because it's unproductive, but I don't tell you as a person that you're wrong. But if we become more aware of our anger, we will tend to make this choice less, especially if we see other choices. But simple awareness alone will lead to less anger. Simply seeing it. Why? Because we are basically good. We human beings are basically good. And if we see that we're making a stupid choice, we tend to look for other choices and make those. We really do. We really are good. Lady was talking to me about her marriage, and she was saying, my husband does this wrong and that wrong and another thing. She could have gone on for, I'm sure, years or volumes, whichever came first. And I said, I'm sure he does everything that you're saying. She said, so how do I stop him from doing those things? I said, you don't. Well, what do you mean? I said, he's not the primary problem. She said, you don't mean to suggest that I might be the problem. I said, no, I'm not suggesting it. I'm telling you that you're the primary problem. She said, well, I don't understand. And then she began the catalog all over again from the top of his crimes. I interrupted. I said, I've heard the catalog. I believe every word you say about him, that he's stupid and insensitive and all of that, and ungrateful and blah, 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 and he's still not the primary problem. She said, well, I don't get it. I said, that's the first true thing you've said in this conversation. You really don't get it. So we went through all the things he did: withdraw, hide, lie, act like a victim, and more. And I said, all of those behaviors are responses to what? Fear. She said, well, fear of what? Keep in mind that this entire time that she's talking to me, her hair's on fire. That's how mad she is. I said, he's afraid of your anger. Now, to be fair, he's been afraid all his life because of the pain of his childhood. In fact, because he was familiar with anger all of his life, that's one of the reasons he married you. Even though he didn't like anger, he was familiar with it. So when he saw you with your smoldering disapproval, oddly, he was attracted to what was familiar, even though he hated it as a kid. I said, so he came to your marriage afraid, but you make it much worse. She had to identify her anger before we could even think about her being happier, and before we could talk about their marriage. As I said earlier, no good feeling can survive the presence of anger. I said, as long as you're angry, it is not possible for you two to work on another single issue. Anger trumps everything. It blots out the light of the sun. It destroys all growth and hope and happiness, everything. Now, does that mean that the relationship was her fault? Is that what I was saying? No. Here's what I'm saying. Even though all getting and protecting behaviors make happiness impossible, not just anger, some of them have to be addressed first, like anger, before we can do any work on the others. So let's say that for example, I have a problem with hitting people. And you and I are in a relationship, and you have a problem with withdrawing from people. So let me propose that we work on your problem first, withdrawing. So while I'm hitting you, you need to practice not flinching or running away from me. You need to work on your withdrawal, and then I'll work on my hitting. Well, that's ridiculous. No, I have to work on my hitting first. And anger is like that. Anger is emotional hitting. And we have to work on the hitting before the withdrawing. We have to work on the hitter before we work on the hittee. The angry woman continued. She said, but I'm not angry all the time. I'm sure you're not. There are several hours a day when you're asleep. So I asked her husband what percentage of the time he would estimate that she was angry, which would include irritated, frustrated, annoyed, disappointed, all those words that we use instead of angry. And he thought for a minute. They were sitting there together, and he said, she's probably angry 80% of the time. I would have guessed higher. So he was actually, I think, being kind. She immediately said, I am not. I said, how would you know? She said, because I know myself. I know when I'm angry. I said, no, my dear, that is completely untrue. Many, many times in our past conversations, just between you and me, where your husband was not there, You have told me that you absolutely were not angry at me, but you were. And you have told me that you absolutely were not angry at your husband, but you were. I continued. Your pain and anger, and this is true for a lot of us, make it entirely impossible for you to recognize what you're doing, or even who you are, for that matter. Another way of saying it is your pain and anger make it entirely possible for you to recognize your pain and anger. Your blindness makes you blind to your blindness. She said, well, my friends don't tell me that I'm angry. I burst into laughter, and I don't do that very often. I said, well, of course they don't. And for at least 5 reasons. 1, they know what happens when you get angry. You go nuclear. You leave no prisoners or wounded behind. You destroy people. So if they see that's what you're like when you're angry, what are the odds that they would tell you about your anger and possibly become the object of your wrath? 0. 2, the people who would not put up with your anger simply walk away from you. They wouldn't be your friends. So what you call your friends, really a group of people who have been pre-selected themselves for the quality that they would never confront you. 3, you have unconsciously chosen people who will put up with your anger, who will not contradict you. And usually you choose people who behave in the same way you do, so they wouldn't notice that you are angry, because they are. 4, you choose people who don't do the things that annoy you in the first place, so your anger would be far less with them. And last, your anger is less with your friends because you know that they eventually have limits. And if you cross the line, you'll lose them as friends. Whereas with your husband, you believe he has to put up with your anger. Because remember when you got married, he promised to stay with you no matter what. Well, friends don't make that promise. So I said, of course your friends don't tell you. For the reasons we just talked about, you're less angry with them, and they're not likely to tell you if you are. But if you do get angry with them, you actually then compensate for it in other ways, by being more sociable, by doing things for them, by sharing your financial resources with them. You essentially pay them, in some cases literally with dollars, in other cases emotionally, to stay with you and put up with your anger. That's why you need me. I'm not afraid of you. You can't manipulate me. I also don't need you to change, so I can truly see you and tell you what's true. Now, that doesn't make me better than anybody else. I'm just not afraid or needy. You don't have a single person in your life who can do that. If they've ever tried to tell you in the past that you were angry, you shot them and eliminated their speaking up. She listened. She said, so who can I trust to help me see my anger? She didn't hear me the first time. This was new ground for her. I said, who's helped you so far? She said, well, you have. There's your answer. So for 2 weeks, we tried it for 2 weeks to start with. I suggested that she speak to nobody but me, not to her husband, not to her friends, not to anybody, so that she wouldn't get angry. And if she did get angry, because she did, I'd be able to tell her that she was angry, because other people wouldn't. The same woman would sometimes say to me, well, I didn't mean to be angry, to her husband or to whoever. I said, well, I believe you, but you didn't mean not to either. When we're angry, it is not good enough to say, I didn't mean to, because we didn't mean not to. So remember that quite some time ago, we began with how to eliminate anger. And we started with this PowerPoint. First step is to be aware of it and not deny it. So let's distill some points about identifying anger to make it simple and easier to remember. How can you tell if you're angry? One way is that other people are angry. Anger is like a fire. Somebody lights the match, and then people keep adding fuel to the fire. So just consider the possibility, if somebody around you is angry, that you might have lit the match, or at the very least that you're adding fuel. Who started it? Did you light the match or just add fuel? Who cares? Remove the fuel of your anger, and very often the fire dies. But there's an exception. Some people are angry all the time, or for reasons utterly beyond your understanding or control. In other words, they suffer from PTSD. So although this is an indication that you're angry, it's not perfect, because some people are angry no matter what you do. Another way to tell if you're angry is that other people become defensive. Kind of obvious. People defend themselves from attack. When somebody is defensive, just consider that it might be you. Just consider it. But again, some people are defensive all the time, PTSD, so it might not be, but it's at least worth thinking about. Another way to tell that you're angry is that the people around you are repeating themselves. Like I said, I think last week in a lesson on listening, a husband asked me why his wife repeated everything. I said, because you don't listen. And people often repeat themselves also because we're angry, which is just a variation on not listening. Because in anger, we're focused on ourselves. And if we're focused on ourselves, we can't be truly listening to somebody else. If you're talking to somebody and they're angry at you, there's no way you're going to get the feeling that they're listening to you. And so they're going to tend to repeat themselves over and over till you finally hear them or you shoot them. Another way to tell that you're angry is that you are repeating yourself. We can sometimes be calm when we say something once, maybe twice, but after that, we tend almost always to become a bit impatient. We become disappointed. We become annoyed that we're having to continue to repeat ourselves. In short, we become angry. So if you're repeating yourself over and over, it's unlikely that you're remaining peaceful or calm. Another way to tell if you're angry, if you're anything other than peaceful. That's it. Why? We love to claim that we're not angry. We love it. I'm just frustrated, or I'm just annoyed or disappointed or unsettled or whatever. Some people get out of thesaurus and come up with clever words to not admit that they're angry. But when we're not peaceful, we all learned at an early age the power of anger. So if we're not peaceful, we are most likely of all the behaviors to become angry at some point, because we've seen how well it works. Another way to tell if you're angry, ask. You really want to know if you're angry? Ask somebody close to you who has the guts to tell you. Now, that's not very many people, but you find somebody like that and you say, look, I'm just realizing that I'm angry around people far more than I knew. I've been doing it for so long that I'm blind to it, so I need some help. I need somebody who won't back down from me and will tell me when I'm being angry. I might even deny it, but keep at me. When you tell me that I'm angry and I argue, say this. Say, this isn't a discussion. You're blind to this. I'm telling you that you're angry. And you don't have to do this. I'm just asking you if you would. You know, you might have to go through dozens of people before you find somebody who has the guts to do that for the reasons that we talked about. Because we tend to carefully choose as friends people who will not be honest with us. They'll tell us that they'll do it, but then they won't. We'll even ask our friends, do I strike you as an angry person? What friend is going to say, yeah, you know, that's been bugging me for years. I've just never told you. It almost has to be somebody very close to us, like our partner. In fact, our spouses are more likely to tell us than anybody because they live with it the most. And we need to prepare them in the way that I just talked about. Now back to our original string of thought, eliminating anger. We talked about the first step, be aware of it, not deny it. The second would be to admit to yourself, not just that you're angry, but that you're wrong. It's not enough just to see it. You've got to see how wrong anger is. It's not complicated. We talked about this before. Anger is selfish, destroys happiness in relationships, sucks the life out of everyone involved. It doesn't work. So it is wrong. If we can admit to ourselves that it's wrong, we'll begin to look for alternatives. That's why it's so important that we do that. We have to admit to another person that we're wrong. Why? Because telling the truth about your anger creates, first, a sense of, or a condition of, accountability. We've been angry all of our lives, and nobody ever holds us accountable, except for maybe when we were children, our parents would. We've come to accept as a given that there are going to be no consequences for our anger. In fact, we tend to get what we want when we're angry. I know a woman who's angry all the time, and she gets what she wants from her friends and everybody else when she's angry. And so when I tell her that she's angry, she says, I am not. I said, I'm just the only person who holds you accountable. So she did start asking people, and she discovered she's a way more angry person than she realized. We're not honest about our anger. We don't see it in our defense, and accountability forces us to see it. It also creates, as we tell the truth about our anger to other people, it creates an opportunity to feel loved in the fashion that we've all seen many, many times. As we tell the truth, we create at least the opportunity to feel seen. That doesn't mean we're going to be seen every time. Some people won't see us when we tell the truth. It creates the opportunity to feel accepted. It creates the opportunity to feel loved. And it tends to be true that the harder the truth, the more difficult, the more we feel loved. Anger is a hard truth to tell. I mean, how often do you hear people say, I'm really an angry and selfish person? Outside of a real love group, I'm trying to think if I've ever heard anybody say that. Because of denial, shame, because of the selfishness of it. People hide it. They deny it, which should tell you something right there. People don't deny when they are of service to somebody else. They don't deny that they're smart. They don't deny that they're clever or witty. And yet they almost just automatically deny that they're angry. So we kind of deep down inside have this inner moral compass that tells us that anger's wrong. Another way to eliminate it is to ask an object of your anger to tell you every time you are. Now, we already kind of mentioned this. So in how to know that you're angry, when we said ask is one way. It's a powerful level of accountability. I was talking to an angry lady, and I got her husband on the phone. And I said, she gets angry a lot. He said, yeah, she does. I said, I'm going to help you. Would you like that? He said, I really would, because nothing I've done's helped. I said, so would you be willing to do this? Every single time she gets impatient or irritated or anything remotely like it, you will say, sweetie, you're becoming irritated. There was a long pause. I mean, really long. I said, you're afraid of what will happen if you do that, aren't you? He said, yep. I said, understandable. You already hate it when she gets angry. And if you point that out to her, she would tend to become more angry. In fact, probably just blow you away with a flamethrower. He said, yep. So I said to her, I'd gotten him on the phone. She was with me. If he tells you that you're angry, you have to assume that he's right. Oh, she just lit up. And I don't mean with pleasure. She said, but what if he says I'm angry and I'm not? How we love to be right. I said, oh, sweetie, the odds of that are infinitesimally small. First, you're angry a great deal and you hardly ever seen it. I've been there when you've been angry and you've denied it. And two, he would be much more likely to see your anger because it affects him more. If you and I are working together in the backyard digging a hole and I'm swinging a pick, and I'm not looking at what I'm doing, and I hit you in the side of the head with a pick, that's going to be much more memorable to you than to me. Anger is much more memorable to the hittee than it is to the hitter. So he's going to be much more likely to see your anger, whereas you don't notice it because it hurts him more. Third, if he tells you that you're angry, he knows that the odds are high that you will cut off his head. So why would he tell you that you're angry when you're not, knowing that he's going to get his head cut off? That doesn't even make sense. He wouldn't. In fact, I've often said to people when they're furious at me that I'm pointing out that they're angry, I say, honey, the fact that I would point out to you that you're angry, it might be the ultimate evidence that I love you. Because I knew when I thought about telling you about your anger that you'd get angry at me. Well, why would I do that unless I cared about you? So I said to this woman, so when your husband says that you're irritated, that is not a suggestion. He will be telling you that you're angry. And you get to say only one thing in response. What? She asked. I said, you get to say, thank you. Because he's saving your life. Your anger's killing you. It's killing him. It's killing your marriage. It's killing your kids. So when he points it out to you, he's saving your life. It's like pointing out that you have cancer. The only appropriate response is thank you. She was stunned. I asked him if he'd be willing to do this for just 24 hours. And if she argued with him even once, he was to call me so we could have a conference call. At the end of 24 hours, he called me and he said she hadn't spoken a word all day. He was beside himself with joy, but unfortunately, she hadn't really learned anything because she just learned to shut up. So instead of being angry, she learned to withdraw or to run. Of course, she did eventually become angry, and so we moved into the next step in eliminating anger, which is to get loved and avoid all unloving situations if necessary. Unloving includes frightening situations. So if you're an angry person, be around loving people, not angry people. Be around people with the guts to tell you about your anger. As I mentioned before, if need be, speak to only one person who is capable of pointing out your anger when you do get angry. So that you, in fact, even if you don't get angry, if you speak to just one loving person so that you have 2 weeks to heal from the wounds of your own anger, it's beneficial. It's like going to intensive care. We need a relief from the pain of it. So I did that with this woman. Just me and her. She talked only to me. And what happened in the process? Event, judgment, feeling, reaction. My interactions with her provided vastly different events from what she'd ever known before, so that her judgment could change. Her previous judgment was that she was worthless. As I loved her over a period of 2 weeks and I was the only input, her judgments changed from I'm worthless and life is always threatening to I'm worthwhile and people are not always attacking me. So slowly her feeling changed from fear to peaceful. Once her feelings changed, her reactions changed. She was not angry all the time. Now, it took her a little longer than that to learn to do that with her husband and with others. But some people simply need an experience where they're not rewounding themselves all the time. Another way to eliminate anger is to just stop it. Now, this would be the last one, but this might be the hardest one. But it also might be the most important one. When you see your anger, shut up. If somebody tells you about your anger, somebody that you've asked to tell you, shut up. A woman once said to me, this isn't fair. You keep talking to me about not being angry, but you haven't talked to my husband about his not withdrawing. We've talked about this to some extent. I said, well, first, the most injurious behavior has to stop first. The hitting has to stop before the withdrawing. And I said, second, notice I haven't said a word to anybody about becoming more loving. That takes a lifetime. That's what your husband needs to learn to do. He is fairly insensitive and kind of an emotional moron. He's going to have to learn to be more loving, but that's gradual. That's something that we learn step by step. But the wounding has to stop now, and it can. So, for example, somebody who's a drug addict, it's too wounding. They have to stop using drugs. Somebody who's an alcoholic, no, it's too wounding. They've got to stop using alcohol because it makes all the other steps impossible. Somebody who hits, that's got to stop. I talked to a woman just the other day whose mother died when her father just, in a fit of anger, pushed her out of the way. She fell, hit her head on the corner of a table, and died. When we're angry, we're blind. He maintained for years that he just slightly pushed her out of the way. Pfft, ridiculous. I've been angry before. When I'm angry, I have no idea. I don't remember later what exactly I said. I don't know how hard I'm pushing somebody. So there can't be any hitting, and there can be no anger. So we can't become loving overnight, but we can stop some of the most injurious behaviors right now. And we have to. And it turns out it's actually easier to stop anger 100% than it is to slowly diminish it, just like any addiction. Way easier to take anger to zero, because then it's really pretty obvious when it's there. Whereas if you're angry 100% of the time, you take it down to 90%, frankly, nobody's going to notice the difference. And you're always going to come up with another reason to be angry on the next occasion. So really, you don't learn anything. You don't really learn anything about being sober from anger until you stop. And it's way funner. Ambrose Bierce, prolific author, said, "Speak when you're angry and you'll make the best speech you'll ever regret." When you're angry, there is not a thing that you say or do that will be productive. Oh, you might make a correct decision at work about production for a week when you're angry, but overall you'll damage relationships and you'll damage production. People will get you back. They'll work slower. They'll cooperate less and more. So we've learned that anger is horribly destructive beyond speech, in fact, and that if we stop it completely, what it does is create the opportunity to learn to be loving, to learn to be kind, to learn to be happy. Anger might be the greatest single obstacle to happiness on earth. I can tell you from my own experience that you're never done dealing with anger. If you have any amount of pain left in you, anger is going to come up from time to time. Anger is just such an easy way to respond to pain. So you maybe think that you're doing just great. You may not have been angry in a month, and then you'll get a little tired, a little sick. Somebody will say something that's difficult for you to hear. You're still doing okay, but your supply of love is decreasing step by step. And then somebody will say one more thing and take your supply of love from little to none, and you'll snap. And sometimes people will call me in their anger and say, well, I just feel really terrible because I thought I'd actually learned something. And somebody said something to me, and I just blew up at them. So I asked them about the hours preceding the time that they blew up. Nah, they just got slowly drained. So when we do get angry, we don't need to beat ourselves up about it. It's just information. It just tells us that we've gotten off the path. Well, I can sit and cry about the fact that I'm off the path, or I can just get back on it. All I have to do is call somebody, and as one of the ways that we've indicated during this lesson to eliminate anger, I can call somebody and tell the truth about my anger. First admit it to myself, then tell somebody else, become accountable for my behavior, and create opportunities for somebody to unconditionally love me while I'm making a mistake, while I am wrong, selfish, and destructive. And as I fill up with the love that obviously wasn't there when I got angry, my anger tends to just blow away. I've seen that happen consistently with thousands of people over 20 years. So I make that promise to you. Follow the steps that we've talked about for recognizing your anger, for admitting it, for eliminating your anger, and you'll find yourself happier than you ever imagined possible as you eliminate this cancer in your emotional life. So thanks tons for being here, and look forward to seeing you at the next class.